Hello, how are you? Good. For someone who has lived and worked in Brixton for the majority of their lives, to open for TEDxBrixton is terrifying. But luckily I have, of course, rehearsed and practiced, mainly with my 12-week-old daughter, Scarlett. And the good news is she says the talk is brilliant. My wife's suggestion this morning, seeing the nerves on my face, was that I just look out and see hundreds of Scarletts in the audience. That's actually what I'm seeing now, which is kind of surreal. But if you could all coo and gurgle gently throughout the talk, it's actually going to ground me massively. And if those at the front could just be sick on themselves about halfway through, that will actually keep me to time. To be honest, my daughter has actually been a very fundamental part of the development of this talk, because I want to talk about how we do and why we do what we do, how we find our purpose. And when I look at my daughter in wonder, I can't help but think of the tens of thousands of young people that I've worked with over the last 12 years, helping them find what they want to do in the world. And it is my absolute belief that based on the evidence that I have seen, against the perception of stereotypes of young people, every single one of our children is born with the immense capacity to achieve great things. And sometimes it is our greatest challenge to just not get in their way. I'd like to tell you briefly about the place that I work and the way that we trade in purpose. I'd like to tell you one of the biggest lessons that organisation has taught me, how to help others unlock their purpose. It's going to be great. I would also like to finish, if possible, with a story about my own purpose. And it's a story that it's very personal to me and it's very personal to Brixton. And it's a story I've never shared publicly before. So please do bear with me. There is a place just down the road that is truly remarkable. It's a Victorian warehouse with high ceilings, wooden floors, brick walls, Warhol prints, and more Macs than the Mac store. But the really exciting and cool thing about this place is that it's inhabited by young people every single day. On a busy day, the young people outnumber the professional staff. Destiny is testimony to that. This place is rated as life-changing by the young people who use it. It's rated by Ofsted as excellent, but it is not a school. And it is not a youth club. It's not a charity, and it is not funded by government. It's not funded by anyone. It's a profitable marketing agency with corporate global clients. Clients who Liberty bring to a social space. And it's not just any marketing agency. It was rated this year as Marketing Agency of the Year. And next week, we'll be picking up business awards from the Queen. But it wasn't always a success. 12 years ago, two people had this very big idea. Jaded with their own careers in marketing, selling fizzy drinks, trainers, and chewing gum, stuff that no one really needs, and questioning their own purpose, and wondering what could be done to help the lives of young people for whom education, religion, politics, family, the traditional forms of social control weren't delivering for those young people. And when there is a force out there that does change behaviour, that does influence the way young people live their lives, the brands that do connect with young people. And could we harness those brands as a force for good? Could we contact those brands and make them think about young people not just as an opportunity, but as their responsibility? That was the challenge that we set ourselves, and to be honest, it didn't go very well for quite a few years. The one thing we did get right was our methodology. And the doors of Liberty have been open to young people every single day of every single week since. And it's that dynamic that makes Liberty interesting. It's that dynamic that informs us. It's that dynamic that makes us inspired and do interesting things. Our first ever marketing campaign was a TV show. It was a TV show called Dub Plate Drama with interactive endings that allowed us to tackle massive issues and break them down into digestible chunks. It allowed us to grow, bring more young people into the organisation, and eventually need more space. But we didn't want to leave Brixton. We moved 200 metres up Brixton High Street. And our success can be defined in a single word that can be taken into any organisation or business. And it can be found at Companies House in the first line of our memorandum of articles. because Liberty's purpose is to benefit the lives of young people. The benefits of purpose in organisations is well understood, but what Liberty's taught me is the power of finding purpose in working with young people. How many of us are now what we dreamed we might be when we grew up? Considering I'm not delivering this talk wearing an awesome spacesuit from orbit, I definitely am not. But when I was 11, an astronaut was all I wanted to be. And that's okay, because being 11, imagine if I'd wanted to be a social entrepreneur. How annoying. Social entrepreneurs are annoying enough without being 11. But there was a time, wasn't there, when it was cool for us to imagine what lives full of purpose and meaning would be like, when we played at being doctors, or teachers, or firefighters, or politicians, or journalists, or pirates. Jobs that meant something. But that time stops, and the time that time stops coincides with when we arrive in secondary education, that engine of unlocking creativity. And for a couple more years, once we've got out of the habit of exploring or imagining what we might do with our lives, we're suddenly asked to make decisions that will affect the rest of our lives. And we have to choose topics and subjects upon which we're examined, and our performance is reviewed, and we're given a series of letters that determine our success, that will help us make choices that one day will actually determine what we do. And during that time, there's very little conversation, and I think there should be a conversation about what roots us in who we are and what we want and what we love and what will make us happy. At Liberty, we have an idea. It's the idea I'd like to share. It's called the purpose curve. This issue of being measured on performance and not purpose worst affects the young people who've fallen out of education, for whom that series of letters is already an irrelevance. And those young people, when they're presented to us, might find themselves lost, purposeless. We plot them on our purpose curve. The horizontal axis is inspiration. The vertical axis is ambition. You'll know many young people who have one of the axes. There are many young people I've met that we'll talk about today in gangs, not because of their lack of ambition, but because of their ambition. But perhaps there hadn't been enough positive inspiration on their journey. And you know what? Inspiration and ambition are both synthesizable. We can present young people with repeated opportunities, virtual and real, until they're not like the 40% of state-educated children in this country who've never met anyone with a job that they'd be remotely interested in. Nearly half of our children never met anyone with a job that they would like to do. So we can create that inspiration, and we can build ambition, and we can plot young people's journey on a curve towards a sense of purpose. And a sense of purpose, I believe, is far more motivational towards achieving success in life than a series of grades. And I believe these two things should begin to work together as we prepare our children for a future where the only real certainty is uncertainty. A sense of belief in who they are and what they want is just as important as the education that we're already providing. I have to credit someone for the purpose curve. It's a young lady who came to the Liberty offices and found them similarly exciting some years ago. But she was, let's say, more of a challenge than destiny at that time. She was in care. She was in trouble. She was incandescent with rage at the world. But she had an awful lot going for her. She was incredibly intelligent, incredibly argumentative, incredibly imaginative. But she was a force of nature, let's say. In 12 years of working with young people, she was the first and only young person to ever have a fight in our offices, which she won. In time, we presented this young lady with enough opportunities for inspiration, and it helped her build her ambition until it was her time to go and realize her purpose. And in her leaving speech to us at Liberty, when she'd got onto the Access to University course that at the beginning she never believed would have been an opportunity for her, she announced to us that one day she would be the first black female Prime Minister of the UK. And I think that's a rather wonderful thing. I think there should be more young women thinking that could be their purpose, not just a D to E. Whilst I think the notion of a purpose curve could be profoundly useful to augment our existing educational structures, I've also begun, in the process of developing this talk, to wonder how it can be applied to broader audiences. And I've been asked, can it be applied to me? So I've tested that in the development of this talk for you. When I'm asked, why it is that I do what I do, and why do I have the arrogance to believe that I can help others change their lives, I've always thought it had something to do with my dad. And this is something I've considered much more now I've become a dad. You see, my dad died when I was a couple of years old, and I thought I've always just been trying to put something right. But developing this, I found out something much more profound, something much more personal to me and to Brixton. My dad had been a success in his career, in his industry, but he'd also grown jaded with his ability to actually make change in the world. So he left, it turns out, to work with young people. In his way, in a university setting, he found really innovative, new, radical methods for the 1970s before I was even alive to work with young people. He decided there was something in this, and he decided he wanted to set up a business that would make commercial sense and social sense, a business that could make money and make a difference, a business that could be housed in the community but be sustainable through its own profits. Does it sound familiar? Well, it does to me, but I never knew. No one ever told me this. The trauma around my father's death was so great, we never spoke of it. I only found it out 10 years after I'd been running Liberty. And if it sounds familiar at that part of the story, what's even more familiar is my father's first office, where he was using the powers of his industry to make a change in his community, was at the beginning of Brixton High Street. And whilst it was 25 years before I set up my office at the beginning of Brixton High Street, it was less than 25 metres away. He grew. People were interested in this notion. The organisation had success. People came to watch and learn. He started to test out different models. He worked on a TV series. He cracked massive social challenges. And at the end of an episode, he finished on a dilemma. I didn't invent interactive multi-platform drama. My dad did. How annoying is that? His success continued. His office grew. He needed more space. He looked beyond, and he moved 200 metres up Brixton High Street. Our second offices are just as close together. And whilst I could have looked to this incredible history to discover what I could do next, he died, suddenly and tragically. And I have a choice. I want to fulfill this legacy, this incredible professional journey that has clearly informed my purpose, but I want to be out of this man's shadow. So I looked deeper to see if I could find an opportunity to complete this legacy, and I found one in his will. In my father's will for the university that he taught law, he asked that annually there would be a bursary for the student who came last in law. Because like me, he recognised that there was more to life than just achieving qualifications and grades, and that sometimes it's the drive to succeed. Sometimes it's the person who fought against the odds but still made it through. Sometimes those are the champions. Recently bereaved and with 2 small children, my mother didn't have the energy to push that through, and the university sadly didn't have the imagination to see that anything other than a recognition of failure. 30 years later, I try and reignite that conversation. The university is still not interested. And it's surprisingly hard to find out who came last at law from a university. And just as I'm wondering how to complete this legacy, she walks into my office. The same young lady that we'd worked with years before, who'd left us to become the first female black Prime Minister. She'd got into her law degree. She'd succeeded in the first year, winning merits and commendations. The second year she'd found more difficult, and then she'd dropped out. A number of challenges, but she returned, now a single mum, and she completed her 3rd year against the odds, and she just scraped through. And she turned up at our office to tell us the story with a picture of her in her robes and her scroll and her mortarboard that she'd just got her law degree. And I told her my story back. And I asked her if it'd be okay if she would help me complete this legacy of my father's. She said it would, and I wrote her a small cheque on behalf of my father, but from me, paid in full, with thanks for my purpose. And this concluded a series of thoughts for me to understand the role that purpose can play. Because if we want young people to achieve the ordinary and the expected, and sometimes that's just more than enough, then our objective systems work. But if we want young people to achieve something more profound and to begin to measure a sense of purpose makes sense. Because for too long we've built our structures based on an outdated principle, the hierarchy of needs, as Maslow put it, that's only at the top. Once you've achieved and once you succeed and once you've built up, that you have self-actualization and that you give back. Well, I challenge that model. I don't think giving back once you've achieved is enough anymore. I think there are enough of us who've never taken in the first place to expect that from a generation that we're now bringing about. And I believe if we don't augment our educational structures with an idea around purpose, we won't be able to create a generation fit to create the future that we all need. Thank you very much.